Hello, my name is Kazim. I'll be explaining on the topic of leases for this assignment. Now, so let's dive in by explaining what is a lease. So in the UK, a lease is a legal agreement between a landlord, lessor, and a tenant lessee that grants the tenant exclusive possession and use of a property for a specified period of time. It is a contractual agreement that outlines the rights and obligations of both parties regarding the use and occupation of property. Now, case laws and authorities that have shaped the definition and understanding of leases in the UK include first one would be Street and Mountford, 1985. This case is a leading authority on the definition of a lease. It established that for a tenancy to be classified as a lease, it must possess the essential characteristics of a exclusive possession, a certain duration, and the payment of rent. Now, second one would be the Prudential Assurance Company Limited and London Residuary Body, 1992. The case clarified that a lease could exist even if the tenant did not have the entire property exclusively, as long as the tenant had exclusive possession of a defined part or area within the property. Now, the third one would be Bruton and London and Quadrant Housing Trust, 2000. The case introduced the concept of non-proprietary leases. It held a lease could be valid even if the landlord did not have a legal title to the property, as long as the tenant was granted exclusive possession and there was an intention to create a leasehold relationship. Now, these elements, as interpreted by relevant case laws, help establish the legal nature of a lease and differentiate it from other forms of occupancy or licenses. Alright, now moving forward is to understand the characteristics of a lease. Now, the key points of what makes a lease are: first one is exclusive possession. One of the fundamental characteristics of a lease is the grant of exclusive possession to the tenant. This means that the tenant has the right to exclude others, including the landlord, from the property during the lease term. This characteristic was established in the case of Street and Mountford, 1985, where the House of Lords emphasized that for a lease to exist, the tenant must have exclusive possession. Now, the second one is a fixed term, or basically a lease typically has a specific duration or fixed term, outlining the period during which the tenant has the right to occupy the property. The duration can be for a fixed number of years, months, or even weeks. The Law of Property Act 1925, Section 149, Clause 6 states that a lease must have a term of more than 3 years to be considered a legal lease. However, shorter leases may still exist, but they may not carry the same legal rights and protections as longer leases do. Now, the third one would be the payment of rent. The tenant is obligated to pay rent to the landlord as consideration for the use and possession of the property. The amount and frequency of rent payments are typically specified in the lease agreements. The obligation to pay rent is a crucial element of a lease and distinguishes it from other types of agreements. Now, failure to pay rent can lead to eviction or other legal consequences. Now, do note that these characteristics of a lease are not exhaustive, but provide a broad understanding of the key elements involved, and it is important to consult specific case laws and statutory provisions for a comprehensive analysis in particular circumstances. Now, let's continue by finding out how we can distinguish leases to licenses. Now, in the case of Street and Mountford, Lord Templeton delivered a significant speech that helped clarify the distinction between a lease and a license. The case itself, decided by the House of Lords, it dealt with the issue of whether an agreement between parties constitute a lease or a license. Now, according to Lord Templeton, a lease involves exclusive possession of a property for a fixed term, granting the tenant an interest in land. Now, on the other hand, a license merely grants a personal permission or privilege to use the property without conferring any estate or interest in land. Right. Now, Lord Templeton's speech and the subsequent case laws that followed helped establish several key principles to determine the distinction between a lease and a license. Now, the first one would be exclusive possession. Now, if the occupier has exclusive possession of the property, meaning they have the right to exclude others, it is more likely to be a lease. Exclusive possession is a hallmark of a lease agreement. Now, the second one is a fixed term. A lease typically has a fixed term, specifying the duration of the tenancy. If the agreement specifies a definite period, it suggests a lease rather than a license. And the third one is granting an interest in a land. A lease grants an interest in the land itself, while a license does not. If the occupier receives a proprietary interest or right in the land, it is indicative of a lease. Now, and the last one would be permissive use. A license, in contrast, permits the occupier to use the land, but does not confer any estate or interest in it. If the occupier is granted permission to use the property without exclusive possession or a proprietary interest, it is more likely to be a license. Now, Lord Templeton's speech in Street and Mountford and the subsequent case laws help provide a framework for analysing property agreements and determining whether they constitute a lease or a license. Now, this clarification has been crucial in guiding legal practitioners, courts, and parties involved in property transactions, ensuring a more accurate understanding of their rights and obligations in different types of agreements. Now, this part of the video is for Marcus and Penelope, so there's challenges and obligations. Challenges number one is the nature of the agreement itself. The nature of the agreement is the first challenge, and thanks to the previous insights, we now know how to determine what is the nature of the agreement. The first one, we look at the duration of the agreement. It states that the license shall last until such time as England wins the World Cup. This condition does not specify a fixed duration or term, which is more characteristic of a license rather than a lease. Now, as for the exclusive possession part, the agreement allows Aaron to enter the flat every Friday afternoon to remove recycling, and requires Marcus and Penelope to vacate the property every Saturday afternoon for Aaron's choir practice. These conditions suggest that Aaron retains control over the property and its use, which aligns with a license agreement than a lease. Considering these factors, it is likely that the document signed by Marcus and Penelope is a license agreement rather than a lease agreement. Now, the second challenge that they may face is termination of agreement due to the sale of property. The sale of property from Aaron to Zane may bring up a termination of the agreement with Marcus and Penelope. However, this is subject to the interest transferred and nature of the agreement, all depending on the nature of the agreement itself. Now, moving on, which is the rights and obligation that they may have, is the rights to question the enforceability of the agreement on the new ownership. The terms of the agreement with Aaron were vague, which introduced uncertainty, which by all means proves to provide a disadvantage to both of them. Now, such is expressed in the time frame requirement. This allows Marcus and Penelope to question the enforceability of their agreement under new ownership, where they can argue for a more suitable term and change to a proper form of agreement. Now, with that being said, that is all from me. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you.